to her Lord Narayana? Why does she go to Vrindavan and perform severe austerities to attain the association of my Lord Gopala, the cowherd boy of Braja? I can't understand these mysteries, said Venkata. But you, being the Supreme Personality of Godhead Himself, can surely enlighten me.
Just wait for 1 minute.
I can't understand these mysteries, said Venkata. But you, being the Supreme Personality of Godhead Himself, can surely enlighten me. Quote, Lord Krishna has one unique quality, said Lord Gauranga. He attracts the heart of everyone with his personal conjugal love, Madhurya. Lord Narayan only has 60 transcendental qualities, but Sri Krishna has 64, and all of them are saturated with his unique quality of Madhurya. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, attracts the mind of Lakshmi Devi, but Lord Narayan can never attract the minds of Vraja Gopis. In Vraja Leela, Krishna, disguised as Lord Narayana, once appeared before the gopis who were searching for Krishna. Seeing the Lord Narayana, the gopis said, "O Lord Narayan, pranam. Where did Krishna go? Did you see?" By following the gopis who spontaneously love Krishna without awareness of his godhood, one can attain Krishna. The Shrutis worship Krishna in the ecstasy of the gopis. Following in their footsteps, they received gopis' bodies to join Krishna in the Rasa dance. Lakshmi, however, wanted to enjoy Krishna but retained her spiritual form as Lakshmi Devi. Without following the gopis' footsteps, no one can attain Krishna. After receiving initiation from Sri Prabodhananda Saraswati, Gopala Bhatti came to Vrindavan and became a dear friend of Sri Rupa and Sanatan Goswami. He did bhajan in Vrindavan for 45 years, mostly at Radha Kunda. He did bhajan in Vrindavan for 45 years, mostly at Radha Kunda. On pilgrimage, he obtained 12 Shaligram Shila. Later, the Damodar Shila manifested himself as the beautiful Radha Raman deity. Since 1542, Radha Ramanji has been worshipped with pure devotion following precise Shastra rituals. Lord Chaitanya ordered Gopala Bhatta to write a book to check the spread of pseudo-loving rasa and negligence of Vedi Bhakti. In collaboration with Sri Sanatan Goswami, he compiled Hari Bhakti Vilasa, the authorized book explaining the rituals and devotional practices of Gaudiya Vaishnavism Sampradaya. He also wrote Shat Kriya Deepika and the outline for Sri Jiva Goswami Shat Sandarbha. He eternally serves Srimati Radharani as one of her Ashtamanjali, Guna Manjali. His samadhi is within Radha Ramanji's temple compound behind the appearance place of the deity. Sri Gopal Bhatt Goswami initiated Gopinath Pujari Goswami, a lifelong brahmachari who served Radha Ramanji for his whole life. Gopal Bhatt Goswami initiated Srinivas Acharya and many other stalwart Vaishnava. As a young boy, Gopal came to the lotus feet of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Sri Vakreshwara Pandit trained and initiated him. Lord Chaitanya loved Gopal and often joked with him. Once, Mahaprabhu harmoniously called the boy Guru. The name stuck and became known as Gopal Guru Goswami. By studying under Sri Swarup Damodar Goswami and Sri Raghunath Das Goswami, he became expert in Rasa Tattva, the science of Radha Govinda's loving mellow. He enlightened Sri Dhyanachandra Goswami, his disciple, in the same. Dhyan Chandra's book explains the detail how to.
What should I read now or come later?
Yes, read 1 minute.
Yeah.
No, you will not hear him.
वो वेट कर, आप बताएं, आप बोलिए.
You said wait 1 minute, I thought you were telling me. Yes. Sanil Agarwal was saying, और इतने बड़े सपने देखते थे और कभी विश्वास भी नहीं होता था कि एक जादू की छड़ी है. I mean, recording started from here. ये मैं नहीं बोल रहा हूँ, पीएम ने पर्सनली मुझे बताया कि मेरे दिल में इस्कॉन टेम्पल बसा हुआ है, लेकिन सिक्योरिटी की वजह से थोड़ा दिक्कत है. और सबसे बड़ी बात जो उन्होंने बोला कि ये जो मुस्लिम है, मैं उनका भला चाहता हूँ, मैं सबका चाहता हूँ कि सबका विश्वास हो, लेकिन वह इतनी नेगेटिव बातें करते हैं मेरे लिए कि मैं किसी का बुरा चाहता ही नहीं हूँ. बहुत अच्छी अच्छी बातें बोल रहे थे प्राइम मिनिस्टर. देखिए, आज आपसे आशीर्वाद मिलना था, ये भी प्रभु की कृपा होती है तभी होता है. तो मोहन प्रभु से हम दिल्ली में और 2 बड़े बड़े मंदिर बनवा रहे हैं, एक रोहिणी में और एक द्वारका में. सुनील अग्रवाल आस्किंग, आप 75 के हो गए हैं क्या महाराज? सो 75. सो मोहन प्रभु सिंह 78 के हो जाएंगे. अनिल अग्रवाल सिंह, बाप रे बाप, ज़्यादा फर्क नहीं आया, बहुत जोर से बोलते थे. इज रिटन, आई जस्ट चेक द वर्ड अगेन एग्जैक्टली. बेसिकली वांटेड टू से दैट यू यूज्ड टू स्पीक वेरी स्ट्रांगली. प्रभुपाद जी का सारा स्वरूप इनमें आया है, प्यार का प्यार स्वरूप भी आया है. एवरीबॉडी इज क्लैपिंग, हरि बोल. प्रभुपाद का खास संदेश है. प्रभुपाद बेसिकली वर सेइंग दैट प्रभुपाद वाज द रियल मास्टर हु कैरीड द स्पिरिचुअल मैसेज. महाप्रभु का संदेश जिन्होंने सुनाया. And he joined in Worli 40 years back. I'm reading in Hindi, so I can easier. He stayed in Worli for 40 years. Anil Agrawal saying, यहाँ it's 40 years, and today your institution is spreading all over the world. Every place, wherever we go. We went to Japan. Hindi itself, okay, fine, sorry. So, or he joined in Berlin 40 years. That is said in English itself. In Worli अभी 40 साल हो गए. हाँ, 40 साल हो गए हैं. और जो आज जो संस्था आपकी पूरी दुनिया में जो बढ़ रही है, हर जगह आप जाइए, आप जापान में जाइए, आप अमेरिका में जाइए, आप कहीं जाइए तो बढ़ता ही जा रहा है. यही संस्था है जहाँ पर कि मैं लास्ट वीक ह्यूस्टन गया था, उससे पहले जयपुर गया था. तो जयपुर में किसी ने कहा यहाँ पर इस्कॉन का मंदिर बना है, तो मैंने कहा कि चलो भाई, टाइम भी नहीं था, भागते भागते गए. इतना सुंदर मंदिर और सब जगह कोई ऐसा मंदिर नहीं हुआ लेकिन झगड़ा नहीं पड़ा हो. इज लाफिंग. एक तो बता दो जिसमें झगड़ा नहीं पड़ा हो, एक भी मंदिर नहीं. मतलब ये कि सबसे पहली परीक्षा प्रभु जी ले लेते हैं कि भैया इसको झगड़ा नहीं करो, इनमें कितना दम है बनाने का, वो दम देखो. तो गुरु महाराज सिंह, कुरुक्षेत्र भूमि पर जब भगवान ने गीता को उपदेश दिया था, तो उस स्थान पर यू मेंशन ज्योति सर ऑल्सो, तो उस स्थान पर भगवान ने यहाँ पर मंदिर बनाने की प्रभुपाद की इच्छा थी कि सो ही सेइंग कुरुक्षेत्र. हाँ, अच्छा है, बहुत अच्छा है. अगर कुछ समय मिला तो बहुत अच्छा है. अग्रवाल सेइंग दैट पार्ट नॉट क्लियर, आई एम गोइंग टू हियर इट अगेन. अगले महीने आऊँगा फरवरी में, जरूर आइए. एंड यू आर आस्किंग मोहन प्रभु, यू हैव हिज नंबर? मोहन प्रभु सेज यस, आई हैव हिज नंबर. मेरे अनिल गौरव से मेरे को पता रहता है आप हैं, तो मैं पता रहता है कि आप हैं, तो मैं आपके चरणों में ही बैठा रहता 2-4 घंटा आपकी बात रखने के लिए. तो यू आर आस्किंग, आप बॉम्बे जाओगे? हाँ, बॉम्बे से फिर लंदन जाएंगे, फिर कल रात में. आशीर्वाद हरदम साथ में रहता है, बहुत अच्छा है. लंदन आइए, लंदन एक बार ज़रूर आइए, बहुत अच्छा रहेगा. वहाँ पर कई ऐसे कार्यक्रम भी चल रहे हैं. अभी एक बहुत बड़ा काम हुआ है. सो यू आर आस्किंग, 100 बच्चे तो रोज़ आते जाते होंगे? हाँ, 100 बच्चे रोज़ जाते हैं. अभी बच्चों की तबीयत ठीक नहीं है. दुबई में थे ना, तो मैं मिला परसों उनसे, परंतु गोपीचंद, अशोक और वो लोग थे. 1 or 2 places इट्स नॉट क्लियर, आई एम गोइंग टू हियर इट अगेन. यू सिंह, अच्छा. देन यू सिंह, स्कूल में तो पहले पर रोज़ आते थे. मतलब सिंह, हाँ, आपका आशीर्वाद बहुत अच्छा रहता है. बहुत क्या, मेरा ऐसा आज भाग्य था कि गोपाल कृष्ण महाराज जी से मुलाकात हो गई। ये कुछ दर्शन होते हैं तो एक जो किसी से अगर सीखना है तो प्रभु की कृपा से काम को आगे बढ़ाना है। वो बोलते थे मेरे को कि एक बार जो निश्चय कर लिया उसके आगे बढ़ाओ। बहुत अच्छा, मैं चलो ये से हम आपको वो कॉइन देना चाहते हैं। ले लिया प्रभु जी। सो बॉम्बे में आप कहाँ रुकते हैं? बॉम्बे में मेरा घर तो ताज के पास में, गेटवे ऑफ इंडिया के पास वहाँ रहते हैं, और मैं शू स्ट्रीट के पास में रहता हूँ। आपकी कृपा ही है। किसी ने सोचा नहीं होगा कि आपका वेदांता का प्लान इतना ज़्यादा फैल जाएगा। आप राधा पादशादी के दर्शन कीजिए। हाँ, बस मैं कर रहा हूँ, करके जा रहा हूँ। मेरा वो 10:30 बजे मीटिंग है, वो करते हुए सीधा मैं एयरपोर्ट निकलता हूँ। मेरे को अगर मालूम होता कि आप हैं, मैं सुबह आ रहा था कि मैं सुबह 6:30 बजे चलता हूँ, 7 बजे गुरु पूजा करेंगे, 7:15 बजे फिर वहाँ से निकलेंगे। फिर कुछ योग नहीं हुआ तो मैंने कहा चलो ठीक है, दर्शन कर लो। इतना रुकावट थी, इतना रुकता है कि यहाँ इसको पार कर सकते हैं। दिस इज व्हाट इज सेट नेक्स्ट टू दी चरणामृत एरिया। छीन नहीं सकते। एक काम आप बता दीजिए जो आपका बिना की तकलीफ के हो, लेकिन आपको तकलीफ होती है और आपको एक भी फर्क नहीं पड़ता। वेल डन। क्या क्या जाकर कीर्तन करवा देंगे और ये करवा देंगे, और किसी से भी मिलने में भाई क्या होता है ये इनको पता ही नहीं है। एक ही आदमी पूरी दुनिया में मैंने देखा है, एक आदमी मैंने देखा है जिसको भय ही नहीं है। अगर ये इंडस्ट्रियलिस्ट होते तो 1000 इंडस्ट्रीज लगाकर टाटा बिरला सबको पीछे छोड़ देते। दिस इज as much as I got from the videos. I'll hear it all again, once again, and polish it up. And if you are to tell me, if you are to translate it, then I'll translate it in English. And where I should carry it, I'll just send it out in all the devotee groups. Okay, Umesh. Thank you, Umesh. Thank you, Umesh.
By studying under Sri Swarup Damodar Goswami and Sri Raghunath Das Goswami, he became expert in Rasa Tattva. He enlightened Sri Dhyan Chandra Goswami, his disciple, in the same. Dhyan Chandra's book explained in detail how to worship Gauranga and Radha Govinda in Raganuga Bhakti. Gopal Guru lived with and served his Guru Sri Vakreshwar Pandit in Jagannath Puri in Kashi Mishra's house where Lord Chaitanya previously stayed. Beside the Gambhira, he established a temple for worshipping Sri Sri Radha Kanta. His unusual samadhi in Vrindavan is in the Dhira Samira area. Shall I read from 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan? Chapter 2. Gopal Bhatt Goswami. Before writing Chaitanya Charitamrita, Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj asked all the senior devotees of Vrindavan for his blessings. Naturally, Sri Gopal Bhatt Goswami, 1503 to 1578, was one of these devotees. However, Gopal Bhatt specifically requested Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj that in exchange for his blessings, he not use his name in Chaitanya Charitamrita. As a result of this humility, Gopal Bhatt's name is mentioned in only 1 or 2 passages of the great work, entitled, and little else about him is known. Biographical information is still available, however, in the Bhakti Ratnakar, and much can be gleaned too by studying the life of Sri Chaitanya. According to Krishnadas Kaviraj Chaitanya Charitamrita, Sri Chaitanya began his walking journey through South India in the summer of 1510. After many days, he came to Sri Rangam, a small city located on the bank of Kaveri river in the district of Tanjore, about 10 miles west of Kumbhakonam. Kumbhakonam. Famous as one of the most important center of Krishna worship in all the India, it is more accurately a center for worship of Lakshmi and Narayan, an expression of divine couple Radha and Krishna. Nonetheless, Sri Rangam's main temple is the largest Vishnu temple in all the India, and the pilgrims came from hundreds of miles to see Ranganatha Swami, the deity of Narayana, in the main sanctum. It was here that Sri Chaitanya met Venkata Bhatta and his brothers Prabodhananda Saraswati and Tirumalla Bhatta. These were Brahmins of vast learning, and they welcomed Sri Chaitanya, the traveling sannyasi mendicant, to be a guest in their home. At this time too, Sri Chaitanya met Venkat's 7-year-old boy Gopal Bhatta, who would one day be known as Gopal Bhatta Goswami. The three brothers and young Gopal Bhatta lived near the Rangam temple, and consequently as Brahmana were dedicated servant of the deity. This being the case, they were naturally aligned with Sri Ramanuja Sampradaya, one of the 4 authentic lineage of disciplic descent. As such, they favored the Aishwarya feature of the Lord, worshipping his grandeur and majesty. In fact, their sincere devotion to the awe in spring and opulence, Lakshmi Narayan manifestation of Supreme, was so pure that Sri Chaitanya felt great satisfaction for them, even though he was teaching the worship of Sri Radha and Krishna. Despite being pleased with their high level of devotion, Sri Chaitanya could not help promoting the original Vedic perspective of Sri Krishna's supreme and original position. Consequently, he once joked, said to Venkata Bhatta, quote, "Your worshipable goddess of fortune, Lakshmi, always remain at the chest of Narayana, and she is certainly the most chaste woman in creation. However, my Lord is Lord Sri Krishna, a cowherd boy who is engaged in tending cows. Why is it," Sri Chaitanya continued, "that Lakshmi, being such a chaste wife, want to associate with my Lord? Just to associate with Krishna, Lakshmi abandoned all transcendental happiness in Vaikuntha and for a long time accepted vow and regulative principles and actually performed unlimited austerities." Venkat Bhatt counteracted by saying that Krishna and Narayan are in actuality one and the same, and it is thus natural that Lakshmi would approach Krishna. After all, Krishna is simply Narayan in another dress. What was the harm if she approached her husband in one of his other manifestations? Is it still in essence the same person? In this way, her action cannot be considered unchaste. Venkata did admit, however, that Krishna represented a superior manifestation. Although there is in one sense no difference between the form and Narayan and Krishna, said Venkata, in Krishna there is a special transcendental attraction due to the conjugal love, and consequently he surpasses Narayana. Sri Chaitanya replied, "I know that there is no fault on the part of Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune, but still she could not enter into rasa dance. This was reserved only for Krishna's most intimate devotees. We hear this from revealed scriptures." Venkat Bhatt, now slightly vexed, said, "I cannot understand why Lakshmi was not allowed to join in rasa dance. I am an ordinary human being. Since my intelligence is very limited and I am easily agitated, my mind cannot enter within the deep ocean of pastimes of the Lord." Next, Venkata acknowledged the divinity of Sri Chaitanya and then asked him to reveal the mystery of Lakshmi's inability to enter into the rasa dance. After all, Venkat Bhatt, as an ordinary living entity, may be subject to misinformation or faulty interpretation, but Sri Chaitanya, he knew was the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and as such, had access to all information regarding these esoteric subjects. Sri Chaitanya replied, Lord Krishna has a specific characteristic. He attracts everyone's heart by sweet interpersonal relationship of conjugal love. These sweet relationships reach their zenith in Vraja, the highest level of God's kingdom, and there they may manifest in any of the primary rasa, such as that of servitude, friendship, parental expression, or at last conjugal love. At that point, Krishna's godhood become unimportant and an incomparable sweet exchange ensures. Only those who follow the footsteps of these inhabitants of Braja, said Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, attain the Lord in his highest and original feature. There he is known as Vrajendra Nandana or the son of Maharaj Nanda, and there he is conquered by the spontaneous love of his most intimate servitors. The highest of these are the gopis, whose superlative love for Krishna is totally unconditional and unmotivated. In order to enter the rasa dance, one must follow in their footsteps. The goddess of fortune, Sri Chaitanya concluded, wanted to enjoy Krishna's association and at the same time retain her spiritual body in the form of Lakshmi. This form is certainly magnificent form. The spiritual this form is certainly magnificent from the spiritual point of view, with all the opulence and power of godly majesty. However, she did not follow in the footsteps of gopis in her worship of Krishna. Consequently, all the opulence and power in the world could not gain her entrance into Krishna's most esoteric pastimes. In this way, Sri Chaitanya succeeded in showing Venkata Bhatta the superiority of love over power, of sweetness over opulence, of Krishna over Narayana. It was these conversations that won not only Venkat Bhatt and his two brothers over to Chaitanya Vaishnavism, but they also won over the young Gopal Bhatt Goswami, who would regularly sit and listen to these talk. Thus, in order to gain some perspective on Gopal Bhatt's reaction to Sri Chaitanya's dialogue with his father, it would be useful to more deeply penetrate the underlying scriptural understanding of just why the Lord's Aishwarya feature is subservient to Madhurya feature. According to Vedic tradition, the inhabitants of Vraja are uninterested in Krishna's majestic form, his Aishwarya Rupa. This form is reserved for worshippers such as those at Sri Rangam who worship the Lord Vishnu feature. If they attain perfection, they go to one of the unlimited Vaikuntha planet after death and worship the Lord of their heart with awe and reverence, for they are inclined to this mode of worship. But awe and reverence are strange words to the inhabitant of Vraja. They are confidential lover of the Lord, sharing a special exchange that is devoid of the distance created by formalities and rigidness. Their destination is the celestial Vraja, where God's Madhurya Rupa, Krishna, the divine lover, sports with them in a variety of intimate relationships. The intimacy is so intense that they forget his lordship and in this way relish an even deeper relationship with him. The Aishwarya feature is thus understood to be inferior because it emphasizes the Lord's majestic and distant godhood. His sweet character and personal attitude lose meaning. Conversely, in the Lord's Madhurya Rupa, personal loving exchange comes to the force. His godhood loses meaning. There are hints of these thoughts throughout the Vedic literature. For example, in the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, a scene is depicted wherein baby Krishna's foster mother, Yashoda, suspected him of eating mud. As she peered into his mouth in order to see if he had indeed eaten it, she saw the entire universe. Her heart was seized with terror. Losing all composure, her natural motherly affection was replaced first with fear and then with awe and reverence, for she realized the divinity of her very special child. Nonetheless, Krishna almost immediately enabled her mother to forget the experience and once again relish him as her ordinary boy. Upon receiving Krishna's mercy in this way, the Bhagavatam explains Mother Yashoda's heart was again filled with intense affection. Another example is found in the 11th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, where Arjun says to Krishna, quote, I desire to see your mystic feature, unquote. Shri Krishna grants Arjun's wish by showing him the universal form. Upon seeing this manifestation of Krishna, however, Arjun trembles with fear. He is overtaken by grief, and any friendship he once felt for Krishna leaves him. After he begged Krishna to return to his more human-like form, the Krishna compiled. Arjun again felt his mood of intimate friendship with Krishna and was able to resume his friendship. In this episode too, after showing his universal form, Krishna manifested his mighty Narayan feature as a cheek of his original form. Even this, however, did not satisfy Arjun. Only when Krishna finally returned to the primeval two-armed, threefold bending form, Krishna as Shyam Sundar, did Arjun feel pacified enough to again relish his relationship with him. Observing these two incidents from Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, David L. Harman, author and professor of religion at Williams College, writes, what makes emotional relationship with Godhead possible is the concealment of the awesome form by the gentle human form. This is the distinctive characteristic of the relationship between Krishna and the highest of the exemplary models, the inhabitant of Braja. Krishna appears to them in a sweet, lovely, and infinitely approachable human form called the Madhurya Rupa, the form most conducive to attraction and love. This quality of Krishna leads to closeness devoid of any hesitation. Haberman then would concur with Sri Chaitanya and Venkata Bhatta when they agree that Madhurya feature far surpasses the Aishwarya feature. Haberman's closing word in this regard are as follows. Quote, the revelation of the mystic form took away the possibility of an intimate emotional relationship, whereupon its concealment within the sweet human form enabled affection to return. The Gaudiya Vaishnav developed the distinction of the two forms to the doctrinal level and proceeded to analyze the various exemplary figures presented in Bhagavad Purana according to their awareness of these forms. Those who were aware only of the sweet human form of Krishna tended to see him as their very own and were thus able to establish the close relationship with him. Unquote. Of course, Haberman's thesis, which expounded on Raganuga Bhakti Sadhana, the path of following in the footsteps of inhabitant of Braja, was originally detailed by Rupa Goswami, and this will be more elaborately addressed in the following chapter. But for now, it must at least be mentioned that this sense of sadhana procedure is very advanced, and as a more fundamental form of sadhana, Rupa Goswami recommends Vedi Bhakti Sadhana, in which one follows the rules and regulations of scriptures under the direction of a bona fide spiritual master. Then, upon receiving the blessings of the Guru, one may proceed to actively follow the footsteps of Vraja devotee and develop spontaneous Raganuga love for God. The step-by-step procedure was recommended and detailed by 6 Goswamis. If one prematurely adhere to Raganuga Sadhana Bhakti, however, one risks imminent fall down from the spiritual path. Sri Chaitanya had thus explained to Venkata Bhatta about Lakshmi's inability to enter the rasa dance, for although she may be considered extremely advanced in spiritual life, she was unable to follow in the footsteps of gopis who are situated in the most advanced spiritual position. This may also serve as a warning to those who attempt to prematurely imitate the gopis. This may also serve as a warning to those who attempt to prematurely imitate the gopis, such as Prakriti Sahajya, cheap imitator. If even Lakshmi herself is unable to enter these pastimes, the common man had better seriously consider the path of Vedi sadhana bhakti. Certainly, this is a safer conclusion than jumping immediately to Raganuga bhakti. In Goswami theology, this cannot be stressed enough. One should gradually work one's way up through Vedi sadhana bhakti to follow in the footsteps of Vraja devotee. Of course, it may be that one immediately or naturally has a lollyam to take to the spontaneous Raganuga path, especially since ultimately this particular path is not dependent on any previous qualification, but such a thing is rare, and in this age it is more likely to be exploited than anything else. Whatever the case may be, as the Leela expressed by Sri Chaitanya unfold, Lakshmi was not ready to follow in the holy footsteps of Vraja gopis. Using this logical and scriptural foundation, Sri Chaitanya convinced Venkata that the Krishna conception was superior to that of Narayana, and after becoming convinced, he, his two brothers, and the young Gopala Bhatta made a commitment to become Gaudiya Vaishnavism, Gaudiya Vaishnavas. After discussing these subjects with Venkata Bhatta for the 4 months of the rainy season, Chaturya Mas, and allowing young Gopala Bhatta to serve him the whole time he was there, Sri Chaitanya decided to proceed on his tour to South India. When they heard that he was leaving, Venkata Bhatta fainted out of separation, and young Gopala Bhatta with tears of love. Just to pacify Gopala Bhatta, Sri Chaitanya agreed to stay for a few more days. During this time, Gopal Bhatta had a dream, although it was more likely a spiritual vision. Propelled by an intense desire to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, before he started to practice the severe austerities of renunciation, to see him in his pre-sannyasi days, Gopal Bhatta was fortunate enough to visualize the entire Navadvipa experience, and by Sri Chaitanya's mercy actually enter into it as a participant. In this dream, too, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu revealed to Gopala Bhatta that he was in fact non-different from Shyam Sundar, also known as Vrajendra Nandana, the original two-armed form of Krishna playing on his flute. He revealed his truth to Gopala Bhatta by appearing in his two-armed Krishna form and then transforming himself back into his own form as Sri Chaitanya. In the same dream-like state, Gopal Bhatta was instructed by Sri Chaitanya, quote, "You will meet two jewel-like person, Roop and Sanatan. I have given them my mentality, Manovritti, in order to publish my teaching. But by your disciples, especially these teachings will spread to every town and village." Unquote. Upon awakening, Gopala Bhatta went directly to Sri Chaitanya to serve him. But at that time, Sri Chaitanya gave him the following instruction, quote, "For now, stay here, serve your mother and father. After they had departed this world, you may go to Vrindavan and join Rupa and Sanatan. Always engage yourself in hearing and chanting the glories of Krishna." Unquote. With these words, Sri Chaitanya left Sri Rangam. Young Gopal Bhatt never forgot those personal instructions or the spiritual dream in which Sri Chaitanya so kindly allowed him entrance into Navadvipa Leela and revealed his divinity. As he grew in years, Gopala Bhatta accepted his uncle Prabodhananda Saraswati as his spiritual master. From him, Gopal Bhatt learned poetry, rhetoric, Sanskrit grammar, and Vedanta. Remembrance of Sri Chaitanya, however, was the central driving force in his life, and he was thus able to defeat all opposing views to the theistic conclusions of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. The Bhakti Ratnakar describes that with the combined asset he acquired from Prabodhananda Saraswati's vast learning and the inspirational memory of Sri Chaitanya's example and instructions, Gopal Bhatt became well known for his advanced knowledge and devotion. As his reputation reached unprecedented proportion, he decided that he was ready to fulfill the mandate given to him by Sri Chaitanya. He was ready to go to Vrindavan. When Gopal Bhatt finally went to the holy land, holiest of the land, he was greeted with great love by Rupa and Sanatan. Meanwhile, in Jagannath Puri, Sri Chaitanya became curious as to whether the now famous Gopal Bhatt had ever arrived in Vrindavan. Local legends and rumor were traveling fast, but Mahaprabhu wanted confirmation. So he sent a letter from his headquarters in Puri to Rup and Sanatan, who were already in Vrindavan, and he asked them if Gopal Bhatt had indeed arrived. A messenger soon came to Puri with Rupa and Sanatan's response, quote, "Yes, he is here. All the residents of Vrindavan, such as Lokanatha, Bhugarbha, Kasheshwara Pandit, Paramananda, and Krishna Das, are getting great pleasure from Gopal Bhatt, who is telling of your stay in Srirangam and your travel throughout the south. We accept Gopal Bhatt as our own brother, for as soon as he arrived in Vrindavan, he thoroughly adopted the life of the renounced mendicant." Unquote. In the same letter, Rupa described a dream in which his deity of Govinda Dev had actually requested that Gopala Bhatt Goswami be his pujari. Vrindavan tradition asserts that Gopala Bhatt may have indeed served the Govinda Dev deity for some time, but it is known that he eventually began worship of his own deity, which he named Sri Radha Ramana. Further, he eventually had a magnificent temple built in the deity's honor. This temple, Radharaman Mandir, is now considered one of the most important Gaudiya Vaishnava temple outside of Bengal. However, at the time that Rupa and Sanatan's letter arrived in Puri, the Radharaman deity had not yet been founded. For the sake of biographical narrative, then the story behind this deity and the temple will be discussed later. When Sri Chaitanya received a letter from Rupa and Sanatan, he happily shared its content with the devotees at Puri, such as Nityananda Prabhu, Advaita Acharya, Haridas Thakur, Gadadhara Pandita. He began to elaborate on the good qualities of Gopal Bhatt Goswami and told them of his 4 months with Gopal Bhatt's family in Sri Rangam. Overwhelmed with joy, Sri Chaitanya immediately dispatched a messenger with a letter for Rupa and Sanatan Goswami. Along with his letter, he sent a package for Gopal Bhatt, which included his loincloth and other personal articles. Traditionally, such items are considered worshipable by devotees. One item in particular, a small black wooden seat measuring about 12 inches in height and 10 inches in width, used by Sri Chaitanya himself, is still noticeably worshipped at Sri Radharaman temple. But when that first letter and package arrived in Vrindavan, all the sadhus, especially Rup and Sanatan, became ecstatic. Gopal Bhatt was deeply grateful that Sri Chaitanya had sent his cloth, and he treasured the sacred paraphernalia for the remaining portion of his life. Further, as Sri Rupa Goswami read the letter, he found specific instructions for Gopal Bhatta. Quote, do not become dependent upon security or adopt a permanent resident. Please spend most of your time assisting Rupa and Sanatan in compiling transcendental literature and thoroughly study this literature as well. Unquote. These instructions he took it to heart and he soon wrote a book entitled Shat Kriya Sar Deepika, a classic on the tenet of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Then he edited Hari Bhakti Vilas, which was returned by Sanatan Goswami. In addition, he wrote a scholarly instruction to Jiva Goswami's Shat Sandarbha and a commentary on Villamangal Thakur Krishna's Karnamrita. Since his most important contribution to the literature of Gaudiya Vaishnavism served to define the rites and rituals of gradual spiritual progress, a brief survey of these particular works is in the order. Shat Kriya Sar Deepika, which roughly translate as the lamp that lights the essence of spiritual ritual, deals primarily with married life. It delineates with great care the 10 sanskara or the holy rites, from marriage, impregnation, the hair cutting ceremony to the beginning of learning and the study of scripture. With this work, Gopal Bhatt Goswami sought to help the common people by giving them valuable guidance on marriage and the gradual pursuance of spiritual life, both for themselves and for their offspring. Next, he compiled a work called Samskar Deepika, which elucidates on the rules of behavior and conduct for a sannyasi or renunciate. He gives detail that explain Vaishnava sannyasi names and scripturally based rituals which one can officially adopt the life of traveling mendicant. Both the Kshatriya Sar Deepika and Sanskar Deepika elaborate on fire sacrifice and initiation as originally taught in the Vedic tradition. Of course, his most important work, the Hari Bhakti Vilas, is generally attributed to Sanatan Goswami, at least in its original form. It is said that Gopal Bhatta later produced a shortened version and added to it the Dig Darshani Tika, which is the commentary of Sanatan Goswami. Some says that the original plan for the Hari Bhakti Vilas came from Gopal Bhatta, but was started by Sanatan Goswami anyway. Because of this confusion, actual authorship is controversial. Nonetheless, the mammoth work is inevitably associated with both of these devotees. The historical evidence in regard to authorship is admittedly confused. On Sri Gopal Bhatta's side, Hari Bhakti Vilas itself states that he wrote it for the satisfaction of Raghunath Das, Rupa and Sanatan. But in the writing of Jiva Goswami and Krishna Das Kaviraj, authorship is unequivocally gives to Sanatan. Narhari Sarkar Chakravarti writes in his Bhakti Ratnakar that Sanatan actually wrote the Hari Bhakti Vilas but attributed the work to his younger contemporaries. Now, nonetheless, Gopal Bhatt Goswami's name in the text itself cannot be ignored. Consequently, modern Vaishnava historians have naturally concluded that the work was collaboration. Shriman Manohar Das, in his Anuragvali, also says that Sanatan wrote the original treatise, but Gopal Bhatta must have written the illustrative passages. Some historians suggest that Sanatan wanted his Smriti to be respected by the orthodox Brahmana, and since some of them frowned upon him because of his association with Muslims, he allowed the book to be published by Gopal Bhatta, who was from a Pakka South Indian Vaishnava family. Whether or not the above is what actually transpired, the orthodox view has come to accept a collaboration of sort. According to His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, quote, the subject matter of Hari Bhakti Vilas by Sanatan Goswami was collected by Srila Gopal Bhatt Goswami and is known as Vaishnava Smriti. Unquote. The Hari Bhakti Vilas is known as Vaishnava Smriti, and as such, it plays an important role in the study of a practice of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Composed of 20 chapters, each called a Vilas, the book takes one through all the pitfalls and dangers on the path of bhakti. With a scientific step-by-step analysis, the reader accompanies Gopal Bhatta as he takes them through basic rules and regulations to the highest level of Vaishnava etiquette. It should be noted, however, that the Hari Bhakti Vilas is primarily for India, and adjustment can be made according to time, place, and circumstances. Still, such adjustment should only be made by an empowered Acharya in the disciplic succession. This is the verdict of Gopal Bhatt Goswami. Living his life as an embodiment of scriptures, Gopal Bhatt's fame spread through all the India, and he became known as younger brother of Rupa and Sanatan. In Vrindavan, his reputation as a master in the process of bhakti became specially prominent after a trip to Gandaki river in Nepal. There he procured 12 shillas and brought them back to Vrindavan. The trip to Nepal and back was arduous, as in those days it meant traveling by foot, but Gopal Bhatt was undaunted. Upon arriving in Vrindavan, however, he felt unqualified to worship his sacred stone, and so he again journeyed back to the Gandaki in Nepal. Carefully placing the shillas in the holy river while chanting the appropriate mantra, the sacred stone spontaneously jumped back into his hand. Trying 3 or 4 times to leave them in the river, he found that he was not able to do so, for the same mystic phenomena occurred again and again. He took this as a sign from Krishna that he was to take them back to Vrindavan and worship them. This he did, and he soon became known in Vrindavan as the Goswami who worshipped 12 unique Shila. He carried them at all times in a cloth bag that hung from his neck. In 1542, 8 years after the disappearance of Sri Chaitanya, Gopal Bhatt felt the need to worship a deity much like Rupa Goswami's Govindaji deity. This need became specially poignant when the wealthy merchant gave him jewelry, ornaments, and fine clothes for the worship of the Lord. Because Shila do not have human-like form, Gopala Bhatta considered that these ornaments could not properly be used in their worship. Therefore, he placed all these items before the Shila and fervently prayed for proper direction, which at least on that particular evening was not granted to him. The next morning, however, he found that one of the Shila known as Damodar Shila had transformed into an incomparably beautiful deity of Krishna just as he had desired. Overcome with happiness, he fell on the ground in all humility and began to offer humble prayers and profound eulogies. Hearing the miraculous event, Rup and Sanatan and many other senior Vaishnava hurried to the sacred spot where Gopal Bhatt was offering salutation of love. They were all there when he named the deity Sri Radha Ramana Dev. Local tradition asserts that the deity was given this name, which refers to Krishna being the pleasure of Radharani, because the area where the deity appeared is near that of a rasa dance where Krishna increased Radharani's attachment and love for him by running away. This Radharaman deity is worshipped in the same place today, Although the modern Radha Raman temple in Vrindavan now boast an impressive enclosure that was eventually built just outside the northern hall of Nidhivan. The original structure of the temple has been refurbished many times, the latest being completed in 1826 by Shah Kundan Lal and his brother Shah Kundan. Although Sri Radharaman himself is not more than 12 inches in height, pilgrims still come from all parts of India just to see his staggering beauty. In fact, his tiny size is part of his special beauty. Moreover, of all the original Goswami deity, only Radharaman is still in Vrindavan. This too is attributed to the deity size. The temple guardian concluded that Muslim soldiers who were destroying all the Hindu idols would fortunately overlook Radharaman because he was very small in size. The well-wisher of the deity were correct, and the Muslim never destroyed the original deity. Cautiously, there is no deity of Radharani in the temple, but at Radharaman's left side there is a small silver crown to acknowledge her presence. Once, several years after Radharaman Dev first appeared to Gopal Bhatt, the Bhatt was worshipping his deity and became overwhelmed with longing for Sri Chaitanya, feeling intensely the mood of love and separation. Remembering that he had at one time promised his father that he would worship Sri Chaitanya, he began to feel a lack of chastity in worshipping his Radha Raman deity. After all, although the deity was in one sense not different from Sri Chaitanya, it was still a manifestation of Krishna playing on his flute. As soon as Gopal Bhatt Goswami started to feel these emotions, the deity manifested his feature as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Gopal Bhatt's tear of love began to flow like a river Ganga as he realized once again Sri Chaitanya's identity as Krishna, now in the form of Radha Raman Dev. This is the realization that he perpetually cherished and shared with others. Gopal Bhatt Goswami came to be accepted as one of the great authorities on Chaitanya Vaishnavism, and he initiated with other such luminaries as Srinivas Acharya, Gopinath Pujari, the latter serving as head priest of Radharaman temple as his life's mission. Wanting his family to care of Radharaman deity for all the prosperity, however, he had to deal with serious problems. He was a lifelong celibate. Gopal Bhatt Goswami resolved the problem by requesting Gopinath's younger brother, Sri Damodar Das, to marry and create progeny. The line of Radharaman servants from this family is still continuing unbroken. It was soon discovered that Gopal Bhatt Goswami was an incarnation of Ananga Manjari, the divine younger sister of Radharani. Although sometimes it is said that he was an incarnation of Guna Manjari. His intense study and elaborate knowledge of scripture acquired for him a reputation as one of the most important religious scholars in India, while his love and devotion for Sri Chaitanya and Radharaman Dev has catapulted him to the status of a saint. He is now remembered as one of the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, and to this day, reverential followers commemorate his exemplary life by regularly visiting his tomb, Samadhi, at the Radha Raman Mandir. Yes, Guru.
The book.
Which book, Guru?
And Yeah.
Sri Gopal Bhatt Goswami, Gaur Ganudesh Deepika 184 mentions she who was formerly Ananya Manjari has appeared to enrich Mahaprabhu's pastime as Sri Gopal Bhatt Goswami. Some says that Gopal Bhatt is actually Guna Manjari. Srila Gopal Bhatt Goswami appeared in 1500 AD, though according to some authorities he was born in 1503 as the son of Venkat Bhatta in the town of Srirangam in South India. Their residence, their residence was in a village not far from Srirangam called Belgundi. According to Narahari in the Bhakti Ratnakar, Mahaprabhu gave Gopal Bhatta a dream vision through which he could witness all of his Navadvipa pastime. Though Gopala was an eternal associate of Krishna, he appeared in a faraway place in order to make a special contribution to Lord Gauranga's pastime. Thus, even though he was living too far away to know anything about Lord directly, he was still able to know long before he met the Lord in person. He had appeared and taken sannyas. As a member of his Vrindavan entourage, Gopal Bhatt did not particularly like the Lord's appearance as a sannyasi. This austere form distressed Gopal, who was thus crying alone when the Lord appeared to him and this gave him this vision of his form as householder in Navadvipa. Gopal was overwhelmed with astonishment at seeing the Lord's beauty and he fell down at his feet. When he looked up, the Lord had transformed into his sannyasi form again. Calming Gopal, he gave him some instruction and then foretold that he would go to Vrindavan before long and there make disciples who would spread his teaching throughout the world. Bhakti Ratnakar 1.123 and 124 says, the Lord then embraced Gopal and drenched him in his tears. He then told Gopal to keep all these revelations a secret. He then disappeared, leaving Gopal in a state of intense joy. The Lord's teaching to Gopal's father. Not long thereafter, in 1510, Mahaprabhu made his auspicious entrance to the pilgrimage city of Sri Rangam. He was invited by Venkat Bhatta, a Vaishnava of Sri Sampradaya, to spend the 4 months of the Chaturmasya in his house. Knowing him to be a strict Vaishnava, Mahaprabhu accepted his invitation. In fact, the Lord's pastime of coming to Srirangam and staying at Venkata Bhatta home was to give his special mercy to Gopal Bhatta and his family, for the Lord knew that Gopal, his eternal companion, had appeared there. At this time, Gopal Bhatt was still a young boy. He was fortunate enough to be able to serve the Lord by massaging his feet. Even though he was satisfied with Venkata Bhatta and his family's service, the Lord observed that Venkata had an element of pride in his object of worship. He believed that his worshipable deity Lakshmi Narayan was the supreme worshipable object and that Narayan was the source of all other incarnations including Krishna, Ram and Nrsimha. His reason was that Narayan is never born, he is Ajay, while Krishna and Ram take birth in the world. He thus thought, quote, Mahaprabhu worships Krishna, the incarnation of Narayan, while we worship Narayan, the source of all incarnation, unquote. As Madhusudan, he is the destroyer of false pride. Mahaprabhu finally decided one day that he would do so for Venkata. He asked him in a mild humor, witty tone, quote, Venkat, I hear that no one is equal in opulence to your Lord Narayan. The same is true for your worshipable goddess Lakshmi Devi. On the other hand, the object of my worship, Krishna, has no opulence of any kind. He wears garland of wild forest flower and uses peacock feather for decoration. He is the son of Nand Gopa and spend his day grazing the cow with the other cowherd boys. My worshipable, my worshipable goddesses, the gopis, are also nothing but poor cowherd girls. I wonder therefore why your worshipable Lakshmi Devi came to Vrindavan to perform austerities in the hope of gaining Krishna's company in the Rasa dance. Venkata immediately answered, quote, what's wrong with that? Radha's beloved Krishna is non-different from Lakshmi Devi's husband Narayan. Unquote. Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu 1.2.59 mentions, though according to theological doctrine, Krishna and the husband of Lakshmi are identical in essence, the form of Krishna is superior when analyzed from the point of view of divine sentiment. This is the conclusion based on the analysis of the divine sentiments. Quote, since the divine sentiment in Krishna is superior, there is no fault if Lakshmi Devi chooses to seek his association and perform austerities to that end. Mahaprabhu answered, quote, I am not saying that there is any fault. I agree that from the transcendental point of view, Krishna and Narayana are identical. The difference between them is based on the variety of rasa. When the Lord performs pastimes of opulence, he is Narayan. When he performs pastimes of sweetness, he is Krishna. She who is Radha is Krishna's pastime, is Lakshmi in the pastime of Narayana. Thus, when Lakshmi performs austerities to have the association of Krishna, there is no question of her breaking her vow of fidelity to her husband. Thus, she went to perform these austerities in Vrindavan. But I have another question. But I have another question for you. Why, even after trying so hard through such penances, etc., to enter Krishna's Rasa Leela, was Lakshmi still unable to do so? Venkat Bhatt was terribly distressed at being unable to give the Lord an answer. Mahaprabhu observed this distress and tried to pacify him by saying, quote, you yourself said that Narayan and Krishna are identical from the theological point of view, but that the superiority of Krishna is determined by the analysis of the divine sentiments. Narayana is invoked in 2.5 of 5 principal rasa, where Krishna is experienced through the complete manifestation of all 12 rasas, the 5 principal and 7 secondary sentiments. Since Narayan's Leela is primarily one of opulence and majesty, his principal devotee is Lakshmi, who also worship him in the appropriate mood of awe and reverence. The same Lakshmi Devi is Radhika in order to heighten the experience of romantic love. Unless one follows in the footsteps of Radha and her expansions, the gopis, who are repositories of esoteric sentiment, then it is impossible to relish Krishna's sweet pastime, such as those virtues which are particularly inspiring for the romantic mood of love. The reason for Lakshmi Devi's failure is that she did not follow in the footsteps of gopis.
everyone. Namaste, Narasimha, Padato Narasimha, Bahir Narasimha, Hriday Narasimha, Narasimha Nadim Saranam Prabhade, Tabakara Kamala Bare Nakamadavata Singham Dalita Hiranyakashipu Kesavrita Madhari Rupa
वो जल्दी तो हो गए, दर्शन का टाइम हो गया।
हरे कृष्णा कृष्णा। जय जय गिरिराज महाराज। जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर सतसंग। जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर सिद्धांत श्रुति गोस्वामी प्रभु की जय, गिरिराज महाराज की जय, कृष्ण बलराम की जय, जगन्नाथ बलदेव गौरांग महाप्रभु की जय, हो नित्यानंद की जय, ताई गौर सुंदर भगवान की जय, श्री लक्ष्मी नरसिंह देव भगवान, उग्र नरसिंह देव भगवान की जय, जय से प्रहलाद नरसिंह देव भगवान की जय। गुरु हे गिरिराज महाराज, हे नरसिंह, हे सुदर्शन, हे उग्र नरसिंह, उग्रम जय नरसिंह, जय नरसिंह, जय जय श्री नरसिंह। हरे श्री राधा पार्षद।
पीना चाहता हूँ और खाना चाहता हूँ।
देर है।